Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to a not so sunny Yorkshire. Delighted to have you with us for our barbecue and cocktails shenanigans. My name's Eddie Ludlow. I'm founder of the Whiskey Lounge, and we've got several guests to come on to talk about various bits and pieces. As you can see, I'm all set up to help demonstrate the wonders of the cocktail. If you've known me for any amount of time, you'll know that cocktails are not my natural theme, but I've come to know and love particularly the two we're going to make tonight. We're also joined by a barbecue meister in the form of Chris Perry-Jones, who's going to show us the best way to treat and cook your meat. And we've also got Nate Booker coming on, who's going to talk to us specifically about ragtime rye, but also about the brief history of the two cocktails we're going to be looking at tonight. So it should be good fun. Anyway, I'm going to bring Chris in first. Chris, are you there?
Hi, Eddie. Yes, I am here. How are we doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Yes. Well, we've been cooking since about 11:30 this morning. You might have seen on some of the Instagram feeds that we on stories and things that we did on the site that I believe that you've been forwarding as well. So for us, barbecue's all about the most amount of preparation as you can. Low and slow is usually the best way to do it. So today we started making Scottish beef ribs and a big bit of brisket. That's what we put in the smoker at about 11:30 this morning. That actually came out about half an hour ago. So we did a quick change of coal, fired up the barbecue, and now we've got a little bit of chicken and a little bit of sweet corn and things like that there for you. So later on, when you come back to me, what we'll do is we'll open up what we did this morning, and then you'll be able to see exactly what it is that we spent all day cooking, really. In the meantime, we've got some chicken wings and chicken thighs in the barbecue, which we use with our own whiskey smoked rub that we do. And we've got some bit of burgers. We've got a Cowboy Steak on there at the moment. We'll be doing little bits and pieces. For us, though, barbecues are usually about how good your accompaniments are. So we've got artichokes to barbecue today, asparagus, the corn on the cob, a little bit of mopping on top, and that's the way you get a really good barbecue, because anyone can put meat on a barbecue, but the barbecues you always remember are the ones where it was all good. So that's what we'll kind of go through today with you, okay?
Great stuff. Okay, well, while you're doing that,
so
go on. Sorry.
While I'm doing that, you'll do some cocktails.
Yeah, so I'm doing
that. You're going to do some cocktails, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going to prepare a couple of cocktails. So shall we leave you to get on with that for now and come back to you? Or?
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Thanks, sir. Take care.
Great. We'll see you in a sec.
All right.
Okay, so that's Chris Perry-Jones. I'd like to make it clear Chris is up in Glasgow, where apparently it's not wetting it down, which seems a bit perverse, but hey, never mind. You can't have it always. It's actually halved in temperature here since yesterday. I think it was 28 degrees at its highest yesterday. It's now 14 degrees. So it's pushing my kind of tolerance to cool weather in a t-shirt and shorts a little bit, but hey, I'll be drink fueled, so it's fine. Okay, I'm going to bring in Nate Booker from Mangrove, who's going to accompany me with the cocktail making, perhaps point me in the right direction if he feels I'm going off piste. Nate, how are you doing, man?
Hi guys, how you doing? How you doing, Eddie? It's wet over here in Manchester as well, so hence why I'm indoors and not outside in my garden getting rained on.
Yeah. Well, at least you are indoors.
Yeah.
To be fair, it's not raining too hard here. That's probably going to cause a massive thunderstorm or something. But it's wet enough that I need to have a bit of cover. But never mind. We'll continue until we can't.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with an old-fashioned, Nate. So
cool.
I think what I'll do is I'll hand to you for a second, just to give us a little bit of history about the old fashioned. While I just get my glasses in a row and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. So, in a previous life, I was a brand ambassador for some other American whiskey brands, and so I spent a lot of time waxing lyrical and kind of preaching the good word of the old fashioned. So, in terms of the history, and I'll try and kind of keep it as brief as possible. So I was saying to Eddie earlier that we used to do an old-fashioned tour of London, and that was accompanied with an hour-long presentation on the old-fashioned. So I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. But ultimately, the old-fashioned is really probably partly the origin of the cocktail, really. Cocktail was defined by stimulating liquor, sugar, water, and bitters. And if we look at the ingredients that Eddie's going to be putting into the cocktail, that is effectively what an old-fashioned is. It's all about balance, really, with the old-fashioned. It's kind of all of these things together. And it wasn't until kind of the mid-1800s that we started to, early mid-1800s, that we start to see kind of cocktails get recorded in books a bit more readily. Mm-hmm. Previously to that, the first mention was one of the first mentions was a newspaper called the Balancing Columbian Repository, and that's where that first definition of the term cocktail, what is the cocktail, stimulating liquor, sugar, water, and bitters. That was where that was first recorded. And then we kind of get people like Professor Jerry Thomas, who wasn't actually, I don't think, a real professor, but I think that's what they called people that were good at their trade in that time. And he started recording cocktails in books. He traveled all over America. Apparently, he kind of, borrowed and stole some recipes as much as he made up and put them in his book. And he kind of recorded something called a whiskey cocktail. And then he also had an upgraded version called a fancy whiskey cocktail. Now, at that time, there was something that was very kind of new on the scene, and that would have been the cocktail shaker. Okay, so in the 1860s odd, around that time, and that was all the rage. And so in his recipes, he actually calls to shake his whiskey cocktail, which has whiskey, acacia gum syrup, I think it was, Bogart's bitters, or Bogart's bitters, I think it was recorded in his book. And then he added shaved ice and then shook it in a cocktail shaker. Now, some people obviously love that new way of doing things, but obviously, as we know, a lot of people like things the old-fashioned way, and that's really kind of where that terminology kind of, I guess, got stuck to that kind of that making cocktails in an old-fashioned way without stirring them, without shaking them. And so the old way to incorporate your sugar and your ice would have been to stir it, or to pour it from one shaker to the other at a great height over ice. So the customers were asking for their cocktails in the old-fashioned style, like I say, which was this stirred down, more kind of slow, less gauche, less aggressive way, basically. I think that some people were quite disgusted at just how loud cocktail shakers were. I can't remember who said it, but I remember reading like a quote from someone that said that the cocktail shaker would be the death of the cocktail. How wrong they were. But in principle, we get to kind of 1895, and I think there's a book by Kapler that was called Classic American Drinks. He wasn't a bartender, but I think he was a lawyer, loved the bev, and he recorded kind of what we know as the modern style of the old-fashioned. So I would recommend to use sugar syrup, just because I think consistency is really key, and it's much quicker to make it a better drink. But I think in his particular recipe, he calls for a sugar cube doused in bitters and then crushed and stirred until the sugar all dissolves, and then adding the whiskey on top.
Yes, I must admit, I'm normally quite lazy, Nathan, and will often just grab the sugar shaker that I'd use for my tea.
Yeah.
Which I know is probably something very naughty, but it works. It's not as good as sugar, but
yeah. I mean, I think I'm all for making it however you prefer, and that's kind of one thing that we always talk about. But in the bars, but ultimately in a bar setting particularly, you want consistency for your customers, and I think that you can truly get the consistency when you use a sugar syrup, which is really easy to make. Everyone watching at home, if you just add 1 cup of 2 cups of sugar to 1 cup of water in equal proportions. It's a really easy way to make a sugar syrup. You can use hot water from the kettle, just be careful. When it's cooled down, you can give it a few stirs. When it's cooled down, you can then bottle it and put it in your fridge. It should keep for upwards of a couple of weeks. And then you can just use 10 ml of that in alongside your cocktail. You can use Demerara sugar if you prefer, or Muscovado or something like this if you want it really rich and a bit bitter. But I think that's a good way to kind of bring on consistency.
Right.
There is also this kind of, in the bar world, we want this kind of element of theatre as well, don't we? I remember when I first started bartending, the guy that was training me said, when people order an old fashioned, it's because they want to chat you up, which was kind of weird because, no offense, it wasn't anyone that I wanted to chat me up at the time ordering old fashions, but that time spent with the bartender watching them make the drink is a real special moment. And yes, I just said let's make it quicker, more consistent, but I think that what you're doing today, Eddie, is a really good balance of that. So you're adding a portion of the sugar syrup and a portion of the whiskey with the bitters, and then you're stirring very slowly and you're kind of building those elements up. And so it's not kind of like completely washing out the cocktail, but it is actually like building up those layers of flavor.
Right.
Now, you might know of the Espresso Martini, originally called the Vodka Espresso, which was invented by Dale Dick Batzel. And he apparently is kind of one of the people that really kind of coined that long process to make an old-fashioned. And I think that was probably just because he was a real fantastic, influential bartender, and people loved spending time with him. So spending time, kind of getting to know him, and he'd ask them about their day and really host them at the bar. And that became known as like the London style of the old-fashioned. So when you see a bartender breaking up the sugar cube, taking their time, that's that kind of London style of old-fashioned.
Yeah. I would have to say, Nate, that probably the most time-consuming and probably the most challenging part of the old-fashioned is the proper garnish, the orange, and removing the pit from the... So what I've been doing... you can hear my 5-year-old son in the background. So what I've been doing, folks, is I basically cut an appropriate amount of peel, and I'm basically removing the pith from it with a very sharp knife, being careful not to tear the orange peel, because obviously once it gets thinner and thinner, it becomes more and more delicate. So and you're trying to open the pores of the peel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the beauty of the old fashioned is that it's the sum of all of its parts, and a garnish is a garnish, and the vessel and the ice are all really important parts of a cocktail anyway. And I think that the orange oil that you get on that last kind of flourish with the garnish is what brings that cocktail together, in that last kind of beautiful moment. And obviously a good friend of mine that I used to work with, he says, if a drink doesn't look sexy, it doesn't taste sexy. And I think that's a real kind of, that's a mantra I live my life by, that's for sure. Yeah. But a little life hack for you, Eddie, just to save you a bit of time next time, is to use a potato peeler.
Well, you could have told me that at the beginning.
I should have said that at the start.
You've just watched me pick 5 pieces of peel, and now you tell me about this.
You looked so into it though, and I just didn't want to. Well, I mean, I'm all for that, going back to basics, but
I could quite it through practice. So
yeah, absolutely.
So as you can see, I've picked them, but I've also cut them into a neat geometrical shape because I'm quite fastidious in that way.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think that's that consistency thing. We want drinks that look on a bar setting. We want drinks that look the same when they go out to customers. And that's really important to customers, because once they go out, your guests, when they have their drink, they want to come back to see you for your same drink again and again. Less important in your barbecue setting, but
they don't always get that in our house, but I try.
No, mine neither. So I talk a good game, but I don't do it in my house. That's for sure.
They get consistency of chat.
Yeah.
And food. And plenty of drink.
Yeah.
Okay, well, should we go and see what Chris is up to while we're
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Chris, are you there? Chris,
Hi,
oh,
how you doing?
how
Yes,
are
I'm
you getting
here.
on?
Right. So, I'm good. Can you see the barbecue one?
No.
No. Tell you what, I'll just grab this and I'll show you from here. It's easier.
Cool.
So we've been barbecuing while you've been talking. So we managed to get the barbecue up to about 180. And on here we've got 2 burgers. We've got some corn on the cob, which we're actually mopping with a Nujura butter. So it's really nice. And then we've got our beer soaked chicken. So we soaked them last night in a Scottish beer with lemongrass and chili. Left them overnight so they got really moist. And then we used our whiskey smoke rub, and then we've just been searing it in. And then this one here is the main attraction, I think. A good old barbecue cowboy steak, which is basically a ribeye. It's got all that flavour. It's seriously thick though, so it takes quite a long time to cook. So the idea is sear it off both sides, and then put it into an area of the barbecue that's a little bit, less. See it there? And in this barbecue, we've put a baffle plate in. So if you can have a look down there, you can see all of the coals. But then I've got a barrier between that and the barbecue. So on my barbecue, I can have a really searing heat around the outside. And in the middle, it's a little bit more kind of like a clay oven. So it allows me to control how much charring I get on everything. So we started off this cowboy steak on the outside to give it a good char. And then we moved it in so that we could just get it cooked. So that's what we've been up to at the moment. You see all that? Yeah.
Yeah, looks amazing. Looks amazing.
Eddie, is everything? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
So like I say, so these 2 burgers we're going to put to one side for a bit, let them rest, and then what I've been doing here is so this afternoon we chopped off all of the sharp thorns that are on an artichoke. Then we halved them, and then we removed the choke, and then we steamed them for 45 minutes. So they're nice and cooked. And what we're going to do now is we've just put a little bit of chili salt on. We're going to put them straight onto the grill. They're going to char up really nice, and then that will be the first start of building up our barbecue for the rest of the afternoon. So that's what we're up to at the moment. And then what else have we got to put on here? A little bit more chicken wings, and this is the first time in Scotland I've been able to have anyone over. So yeah, we're going to give some people some food later. Otherwise, I was going to get in real trouble with just how much food we were cooking.
I was going to say, Chris, that looks like a little bit more than for 2 people.
Well, this is the thing. It's been really nice actually doing this event, because up to now I haven't been able to do the big bits of meat, because if there's just 2 of you, I mean, the one bonus you've got is if you do brisket or you do anything like that, what we generally do afterwards is we slice it up. We have it in sandwiches for the next kind of couple of weeks. You freeze it down. It's just like cooking a Sunday roast, really.
Yeah.
And that's the general. I'll need to put the lid down on this, otherwise it's all going to get a bit smoky. And yeah, so that's what we're up to at the moment.
Fantastic. So would you agree, Chris, that a barbecue is like whiskey? It's good for sharing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. We probably cook everything outside at the moment. But it's really nice having people around and being able to actually just make stuff. Because I don't know about you, you get a little bit lazy when it's just yourself, and you might just have a burger. But if someone's coming around, you'll actually go to the effort of doing everything, like a nice bit of potato salad,
Yeah.
a little bit of coleslaw. Especially since they're so easy to make as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, And that's the reason why we do so much barbecuing is so we run Hawkhead Whiskey Smoked, which takes whiskey barrels from Scottish distilleries and burns them to smoke salt and cashews. But when we first started, I used to be a chef in France and head chef in Glasgow, and we were going to be a barbecue business. So we had the big green egg. We also had like a really, really big American style smoker where we would be able to do probably 50 ribs at once, and that's all we did. But it just evolved into the salt. So when I get to do this, it feels like going back to my roots. So it's a really nice way of doing it, because at the moment, you know, with the smokehouse, it's also production-y, you know what I mean? So we're producing a high amount of stuff to go to retail, but you just lose that little bit of being face to face with people. But what we actually got when we used to go to the whiskey shows is we used to get that face to face, and that's why we used to do so many of them. So this is why we're doing these barbecues, and yeah, it's more to it. I'd like to do even more.
Well, I'd like you to do even more right here. Although I have to say,
well, that's the thing. Oh,
Amanda is doing you proud here at the moment, so you'll be pleased to see what she's up to. Which is very similar.
Oh, that's a great. Here's the thing: with barbecues, you just do it. You know, I mean, I think that's the main thing. I mean, we built a nice little area out here so that we could barbecue when it's raining, because we live in Scotland, like most weeks anyway. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we do Christmas dinner out here. We do everything out here. So yeah, it's great. The one thing I'm really excited about is in a little bit of time, because it's going to be my first brisket that I'll have made in probably a year and a half. So it's going to be really interesting when we slice into the brisket in a little bit to see if we get a nice smoke ring and whether it's going to be really moist. And yeah, talking you through how I got to that stage is going to be absolutely cracking. It should be just about ready to start to slice. So we'll probably get that in for the next time you join us back.
Great. I mean, it sounds great, but I am only slightly jealous.
Well, I'll be honest with you, the local butcher I've got, I didn't know that they do cowboy steaks until yesterday, so I'm really, really happy. I can't wait to get dug into it.
Good stuff. All right, Chris, well, we'll let you crack on and we'll come back to you.
All right, no problem.
Okay, cheers, buddy.
Take care, bye.
Oh.
Hello.
Hi, Nate. Okay, so we're going to crack on with this old fashioned then, right?
Yep.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my simple syrup, which Amanda made earlier in the week. And what I would do is just put just a layer on the bottom of the glass, really, just a very, just enough to.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, less is more when it comes to sugar.
Yeah.
And I think you can always add more, but you can't take it away once it's in the glass and mixed in. So,
right.
And you'll find that generally people's palates are, infinitely varied. But I would probably say on the sweeter side, so you can always add more afterwards. Yeah,
exactly. And the fact is that the whiskey we're working with, well, most American whiskey is intrinsically sweet anyway,
Absolutely.
So you don't need to over sweeten it.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of that kind of vanilla comes from the barrel.
Just about 4 or 5 drops of bitters.
Yeah. Think of a good way to think of bitters is like bartender's Worcester sauce. Adds instant complexity. And again, these come in multiple different kind of styles and iterations. Angostura is kind of the old favorite and the old classic. Again, very consistent.
Yeah. I do have some Dillon's orange bitters here, which I've been using throughout the pandemic, which I quite like.
Yeah, nice.
But I'm using the Angosturas because that's what everyone else has at home, and it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little bit of whiskey just to mingle with the sugar syrup and the bitters, and then we're just going to stir that in just to make sure it all integrates nicely. But obviously the old fashioned is all about stirring, so get ready to do a lot of stirring, people.
Yeah. So interestingly, it used to there is kind of a story that it used to be called the stirring cocktail, and apparently the cocktailians at the time, the people that would drink the cocktail, the old boys that would do the cocktails, would have their own little tiny bar spoon that they would stir the drinks with, which is quite interesting. Actually, think going back to the sugar syrup. So we got when I was doing all my research for the old fashioned stuff, you look at kind of how bartending was back in the 1800s, because that's just how boring I am. But ultimately, quite frequently, sugar would have been used as a syrup because it was often sold in really big hard loaves. So they would have had to render it down into a syrup anyway. So it's kind of more it probably is more like the original to use a syrup anyway.
Yeah. I also remember a good friend of mine, Gareth in Belfast, who's like yourself, very into his cocktails, and he's made a profession of it himself. But he would tell me to stir the ice, particularly if it's a big ball of ice like this, until you almost hear the tone of it change as it hits the glass.
Oh, that's nice. I like that. That's very poetic.
Well, he's a very poetic guy.
Yeah.
I call him the Robert De Niro of the cocktail world.
Oh wow, nice.
He's a great guy. So I've obviously added the ice to the bourbon and the whiskey and the bitters and the sugar syrup, just stirring it. You're basically heading for dilution. You want the difference between just whiskey and ice and an old fashioned is the dilution, as well as obviously the Angostura and the simple syrup.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you say about obviously bourbon and rye. Like, there's a big discussion as to the origins of the cocktail. Was it rye or bourbon first?
Yes.
So I'm not offended at all that you said that, because I think it's a really interesting point. But it's actually about I would argue that it's possibly to do with locality. That in the north, in the USA, in the north, rye was really popular. And then in the southern states, where obviously in Kentucky and below, that's where bourbon and corn whiskies were really popular. So, there is an element of it would have been made with whatever people could get their hands on in their locality and in their region. And there's an argument that, yes, the Pendennis Club have a grand claim to a bourbon old fashioned. There is also there's also logic to say that the cocktail culture really blossomed and really kind of grew in New York, so where there would have been predominantly rye whiskey. So it really is about locality, and I think it's kind of shrouded in mystery as to whether it is rye or corn whiskey. Written down in the books, it usually just says whiskey. So again, kind of gives more credence to that idea that it's actually about locality rather than
nice
specific.
Yeah.
I think rye whiskey was actually one of America's biggest whiskies until kind of like the turn of the 20th century, and that was due to, again, access, and then kind of like the growth and cost of goods. Like, rye is more expensive than corn, and corn is such an abundant harvest and grows so well in the south. Yeah.
Well, also that rye is so notoriously tricky to work with, isn't it? So it's corn is much cleaner and easier to ferment, mash and ferment, whereas rye is notoriously sticky and horrible, frankly.
Yeah, I think you can do a number on the stills, I think. So.
Yeah, exactly. So now I think I've got to the point where I need to be.
Yeah.
I think we've reached good dilution.
I'll have to confess, I'm not actually drinking an old fashioned. I'm actually just drinking straight whiskey.
You're forgiven, don't worry.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my garnishes, which you saw me prepare a little earlier, and I'm going to squeeze into the glass, around the glass, so you get that lovely scent of the orange peel, and then pop it in the glass. And then I need someone to come and
do a taste test.
So, Alison, would you like to come and taste an old fashioned?
Are we orange?
Oh no, you can't have orange. Okay. That's right. I need a volunteer.
So this is right. This is mine.
I promise I won't get a 5-year-old to taste it.
Yeah. So with the ice there, you've done an ice ball. You know, whether or not you use a cubed ice or an ice ball, it is all about that dilution. One solid cube of ice is going to give you, it's going to be last longer.
How is that?
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes.
There you go.
Settle for
Nailed
that. Thanks, Ross.
Very nice.
Eddie, I can tell you that all the bars in York, Manchester, Leeds, and Liverpool are all crying out for staff. So if you've got a spare hour or two later, give them a call and jump in the bar.
Well, I'll give it some consideration, Nate.
Yeah, no worries.
Good stuff. Well, we can move on now to the Manhattan. I think
Yep.
Chris is still off camera, so we can crack on with the Manhattan. And I've kept some peel because you were telling me earlier about zesting the Manhattan glass, which I like the sound of.
Yeah, it's just a nice little extra flourish.
Yeah, well, you know, love adding things to my repertoire. Right, so let's start obviously with the shaker.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the recipe up there as well, actually.
Yeah.
Right, so with some ice.
Do you want me to talk through the history?
Yes, please. Mate.
Yeah. So the Manhattan is obviously named after the region, perhaps, or do we think it's more likely named after a club? So basically, back in the day, it was primarily old white dudes, but basically we would always, they would always go and drink at clubs, gentlemen clubs, not like Spinning Rhino, but more like somewhere where they could discuss politics and stuff like this. I'm making it sound very regal. But basically they would go there and they would have their signature cocktail. So you had the Jockey Club, the Turf Club, the Manhattan Club. There's actually a famous English cocktail that is named after a cocktail club or like a drinking club, which is the Bucks Fizz. So the Bucks Fizz is named after the Bucks Club. So that's a kind of a similarity over there. But in principle, the Manhattan is, like I say, was one of these signature drinks of this kind of this club. Now, the history, again, it's one of those things that's real kind of like shrouded in mystery. It probably is around about 1881, 1882 is when they think it's kind of like first kind of written down. This really cool book here called Imbibe by David Wondrich, I highly recommend you have a read. But there's a really good little kind of passage that I'll just kind of read out to you. So according to William F. Mulhall, bartender at the Hoffman House from 1882 until it closed in 1915, he says, the Manhattan cocktail was invented by a man named Black who kept the place 10 doors below Houston Street on Broadway in the 60s. Okay, now from that kind of, it's very unusual to actually find a cocktail, to find this much detail in the classic cocktails like this. But David Wondrich goes a bit further and says there probably was some truth in this because there was a guy called William Black who had a saloon in Bowery, and they think that the cocktail kind of originated there. In the official history of the Manhattan Club in 1915, they said that the celebrated Manhattan cocktail was inaugurated at the club. So that's kind of another reason why we think it might come from there. There is an old kind of like story that it was Winston Churchill's mum. The cocktail was made for her to kind of capture her time in Manhattan, but it would have coincided with Winston Churchill's delivery, I believe. And he was obviously delivered in the UK. And then there's another little story here. September the 5th, 1882, the Manhattan made its first appearance in print in the pages of the Olean Democrat, which I guess was a newspaper at the time. And it says, it is but a short time ago that a mixture of whiskey, vermouth, and bitters came into vogue. These cocktails back in the day in the classic period were really, really punchy. I was saying to Eddie earlier before we came on the stream that the precursor to the Manhattan was probably something called the Vermouth Cocktail, which they probably would have had for breakfast. And that was considered quite a light cocktail. And on the flip side, you just have a glass of whiskey, which obviously would just send you crazy. So the mixture of both is kind of how they kind of deemed responsible drinking back then. I guess it's a way to manage the intake of booze by stirring it with water and watering it down with a bit of vermouth. But again, kind of a very simple cocktail. I think. I don't know if you want to talk through how you made it. Eddie.
Yeah. So essentially into a shaker with ice already in it. I had 2 parts of ragtime to 1 part of sweet vermouth. I'm using the cocky, which I like.
Yeah.
And then again, like the old fashioned, just a little sprinkle, 3 or 4, maybe 5 drops of bitters.
Yeah.
And then just gently stirring it. We don't want to dilute this one too much. It's meant to be a little bit more intense than the old fashioned. So I'm pretty much ready to pour.
Yeah.
So
this one works really well as well. Like if you think about, so what you're making here is what some people would call a sweet Manhattan. Now, I think this is a real kind of like, so you obviously get dry martinis, right? Which are delicious. And who doesn't love a dry martini? But you also get dry Manhattans. Now, I would say that a dry Manhattan is not to my preference, and I challenge anyone to say they really liked it. But ultimately, the dry, you get dry, perfect, and sweet. And I think most customers think they want a dry Manhattan because they think that that sugar is bad, obviously, so they don't want a sweet drink. They think perfect sounds perfect, which is a mix of sweet vermouth and dry vermouth. But I would say a sweet Manhattan is the best Manhattan. Sweet Manhattan is the perfect Manhattan. And I think that's because when you're adding that sweet vermouth, that Italian vermouth, you're using cocky there, you're getting loads of red berry flavour, which is going to really kind of work well with the vanilla of the whiskey. And then you're going to get a little bit of citrus in there, which you're going to get through from the whiskey as well.
Right.
Cool. And then with the cherry as well.
Excellent. So here I have my Manhattan. I've gone double cherry. I hope that's not too controversial.
Nate, you go crazy cherry.
Let me see if I can get a volunteer to taste it for me.
That's quite like a.
Would you? There's no. Oh, I haven't done the orange thing, but Alison's allergic to orange, so I'm not going to do it just now. I'll do it with the next one.
Thank you very much. It looks fabulous. Thank you so much.
Before we taste on camera.
And shuffle around. Oh.
Good.
Oh, that's got a bit of a kick to it, Eddie. Nicely made. Thank you.
It is a strong cocktail. So the Manhattan probably predated the martini, and then the Martinez probably sits in between that, which would have been gin and sweet vermouth, in its principal parts. For ragtime rye, this is like. This is one of our go-to drinks. If you look at the character of ragtime rye, and I'm sure if the people at home have a little bit left to have a little taste with, you're looking at, cherries, peach, so red fruits on there. You've got a little bit of kind of citrus on there with a little touch of cedarwood, which is, if you did the orange zest, that would really kind of bring that to the fold. And then you've got that kind of spice of the rye, which is also going to be toned down by the vermouth, but it's still going to come through because it's got enough pop to it.
Right.
So go on.
No, I was just to say I'm going to make another one here and try that orange zesty spritz.
Possibly a Ponty bartender technique, but again, with your cherry garnish, that's going to be inside the drink, right? So that's going to impart the flavor when you drink it. But obviously, what we would do usually in the bar world is, a drink is not just about, it's not just about what's inside the drink. It's also about the aroma and all that kind of around it. So we would spritz the top of the drink as well, or I would do even for a sweet, and then also down the stem as well. So when you touch it with your fingers, you've got that nice kind of orange aroma. When you're picking your nose or whatever you want to do.
Right. Okay, so I'm there with that. So you saw again 2 parts ragtime, 1 part sweet vermouth. One of the mistakes I would make, because I like a big drink, is that I would fill the Cosmo glass right to the top.
Yeah.
Then realised that it was impossible to transport it.
Yeah, well, absolutely, yeah. So I'll tell you what, there's been a few times that I've had a tray of martini glasses. I've been in the hospitality industry for about 20 years, and one of my longest tenures was actually running a champagne bar. So walking around with a tray full of glasses, champagne flutes, was a nightmare, terrifying. But yeah, we always like to leave a little window at the top. That's just so it's kind of gives a bit of balance to the glass.
Yeah.
And then traditionally for like a long drink, if you had it with ice, you'd leave a window just because then you can put the garnish on there properly without making everything fall out inside.
Yeah. I'm going one cherry for this one because we're doing the orange zest. So now you said to zest the rim of the glass and the stem, yeah?
Yeah, like obviously zest the top of the drink like you would do for a martini, and then just kind of quickly whip round down the stem.
So literally wipe the glass with the orange?
Oh no, like how you did before with the expressing the olive oil, expressing the orange oils on the top, and then just also down on the stem as well.
Okay.
And it's just more of that lasting impression,
It's a theatre, like you say, but you also
exactly. It's all that effort, It's all that effort that we put into it. So
when you do that, when you've done that, you should smell your fingers because the smell of the peel is incredible.
Yeah. So Ragtime Rye, actually, we talk about the cocktail kind of connection with Ragtime Rye. Obviously, it's called Ragtime because Ragtime was one of those periods where cocktail culture was really kind of blossoming, pre-prohibition anyway, and that's when cocktails kind of really blew up and kind of got crazy. And Alan Katz, who's the proprietor of Ragtime Rye, he's a cocktail fanatic, cocktail historian in New York, good friends with Dale DeGroff, who was the guy that didn't create the Cosmo but popularized the Cosmopolitan. But he's always been kind of involved in this kind of in the resurgence of the Prohibition bar scene, this kind of speakeasy cocktail culture, and that's really kind of where Ragtime was. You kind of drew its inspiration, and that's kind of he wanted to kind of give you this kind of punchy cocktail rye that you could use in a cocktail that would work really well in a Manhattan and old fashioned, but then also as well was palatable enough for the modern palate where we can just drink it straight. Yeah.
Well, I'm getting more requests for Manhattans here, so I'm gonna.
There you go. Yeah, you crack on.
I think Chris is ready. He looks like he's got a cocktail in his hand. So I'm just going to bring Chris in just now, Nate, if that's all right.
Yeah,
I'll see you in a minute.
Yeah.
Chris, how you doing?
I'm good. I'll be honest, I was listening to you making cocktails and I couldn't help it. So I got Coco, my partner, to make me an old-fashioned with the Ragtime Rye. It's pretty good, actually. We used a little bit of our smoked syrup in it, and it really balances it really nicely. So yeah, that'll be a new favourite of mine. We've always used Highland Park for our kind of go-to at home, but I think maybe this Ragtime will take over it, so that'll be quite fun.
Yeah,
so,
where are you at with the barbecue?
So we've cooked quite a lot of it off. What we've done is I've brought it out all of the big ticket things that we did earlier. So let me just point this down, and you should be able to see what it is I'm up to. Come on.
Let's put you on spotlight so everyone can see. Oh.
So this is what we made earlier. So this is one of the briskets. So with this brisket, what we did is we bought this and then we made an injection for it. Okay, so all that basically means is that we made a little bit like a gravy. So we used stock, we used a little bit of sugar, we used some salt, and we used a shot of whiskey. And then what we did is we took that and we put it into an injection, and then we inject the meat. You can clearly see it on the videos that you posted on the Whiskey Lounge Instagram. And then what that does is it goes into the meat, and it just makes it a little bit more tender. A lot more flavour comes through. Okay, so we did that, and we left that in overnight. We usually leave it a little bit longer, but we have to try and get hold of the meat at this point. And then what we did is we covered it in a dry rub. And we put it in the smoker at 11:30. Then we let it cook until the meat was 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That took about 4.5 hours, and at that point we double wrapped it in foil just to finish it off, and then we kept it going until the meat became about 195. Now, all the time we were cooking this at 110 degrees. The whole idea is that the slower you cook it, the better the meat becomes. So let me slice it in half first, and you should be able to see what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Your video is frozen at the moment.
Of course it has.
It's okay. It's frozen on the best bit, but if you're going to be slicing, it'd be nice to see it.
Yeah. Is it moving now?
No, it's not. It's not. I tell you what.
Oh no.
Let me remove you from the stream. If you log in and log out,
I'll come back in.
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay, and I'll get on with making some more cocktails. Sorry about that, folks. The modern marvels of modern technology. Well, I'm continuing to make made-to-order Manhattans. Being careful not to spill it over the side like I just did. I might have one myself in a bit. You never know. I'll bring Nate back in while we wait for. Hi, Nate. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Good.
I'm now starting to know a little bit what it feels like to be a bartender.
Yeah. I remember I used to do some freelance stuff when I, work events and stuff like that on the side. And I remember working one time at a house party, and it just kind of. The house party was good fun, so I ended up staying, and the people were like, "Oh, if you just stay for like another hour, another couple hours, we'll give you, I can't remember what it was now, but a princely sum." And I ended up staying, and it got to the point where I just ran out of all glassware and whatever, and I was just making mojitos in mugs. It was just like absolute chaos, but good fun.
Absolutely.
I think it's a nice thing about kind of hospitality and kind of bartending and stuff like that. It's like a really desirable kind of career when you've got friends that want you around. Obviously, this comes with its pitfalls of late nights and boozy after work beers at 4 a.m.
Yeah, I must admit, I've only really had my eyes open to really good cocktail bars in the last few years. Well, last sort of 5+ years. And, going to places, like a proper cocktail bar where they give you a glass of water before you even have a drink and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when I first started bartending, that wasn't a thing, but that is absolutely a thing now. Or cucumber water, that is like that's the thing now. But I remember bartending when getting a glass of water with your cocktail wasn't a thing, but I'm so happy that it is now. I think it's hashtag please, without being a bore, but hashtag please drink responsibly.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that the drinks world has come on leaps and bounds, and the cocktail culture in I think, to be honest, I think lockdown was obviously terrible for the industry at large, but possibly good for guests, because I think people are more willing to try to make stuff at home now, which is good, because that'll then translate hopefully into and convert into people drinking better in bars. I think that it's all well and good smashing shots of apple sours, but as a career bartender, people want people to be drinking Manhattans and old fashions and stuff like this.
Absolutely. Anyway, listen, Chris is. Oh, where's he gone? He's gone. He was there. Oh well. Now, Nate, obviously, I'm so we're pretty familiar with these drinks for now, and I do enjoy them. But I was going to ask you, are there any other sort of simple and classic whiskey or American whiskey cocktails which you'd recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. So, really simple way. Like I think to me, the old fashioned is like one of these drinks that's a real blank canvas. So, if for example you've got a lighter, more fresher, summery version of an old fashioned, swap out your sugar syrup for elderflower cordial. Sounds crazy.
It's funny you should say that, Nate, because I was thinking about that, because Amanda, one of her newfound skills through the pandemic was harvesting and creating elderflower cordial as well as elderflower sparkling wine.
Ooh, that sounds amazing.
So we've currently got the wine is fermenting, and we already have the cordial. So maybe I should give that a try.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see an flower tree bush outside the house actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, elderflower cordial is really, really flexible. I kind of think of it as like one of these ingredients that you can just add it to anything and it'll just make everything taste good. But a little bit of elderflower cordial, and instead of orange, just try adding in some lemon. And then you've got this really beautiful summer style of an old fashioned. And I think often we think of whiskey as being a winter drink, but that's not the case. And if you look at America, those guys drinking bourbon, drinking mint juleps over the Derby, it's like they're drinking so much of it in the heat. I think that it's just our UK mentality is that we just drink whiskey in winter. We think of whiskey as having like a tartan blanket and slippers and a cigar and a pipe. But it really is. I think with American whiskies particularly, they're probably more accepted in cocktails. And I think I remember looking on the I think it was like Lefroy website, and they were talking on the Facebook page, and I think they'd spoken about a drink called the Penicillin, which is whiskey, honey, ginger, lemon, and then it's got a smoky whiskey kind of little spritz over the top, little drizzle over the top. And you should have seen the comments, man. I mean, you can just imagine what it was like. Everybody being like, "Oh no, it's like sacrilege! I can't believe you're doing that to whiskey." But then no one said that when they're making an old fashioned.
But we were talking about that earlier today, weren't we? The difference in attitude between American distillers and perhaps more European distillers, where in Europe, in Scotland, the UK, the emphasis is much more on drinking it neat or with maybe a splash of water, whereas in the States, speaking to Alan Katz of New York Distilling Company, who make the ragtime rye, he was very much coming from it. You called him a sort of cocktail authoritarian, not authority. You know what I mean? Very, very passionate about cocktails and wanted to help revive that scene in the area, as well as producing a great whiskey to go with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I've gone off topic, haven't I? Which I always do, but we were talking about other cocktails to recommend. So obviously you've got...
Hey, sorry, just before, we'll come back to that, but I think it looks like the carving is about to commence, so we'll definitely come back to that.
I don't want to interrupt that, that's for sure.
Chris, are you there?
I am. I moved inside, so hopefully you'll get a better signal now.
Yeah, much better.
So, I don't know if you can see how far we can get closer to here. Can you see on the video? Can you see this red mark here?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's called a smoke ring. Okay. So it's a sign of a really good barbecue. So that's actually the smoke impregnating the seeping into the meat. So on all long barbecues, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a pronounced red smoke, and then it's slicing apart really nicely. So this is super soft. It's actually breaking apart a little bit, but when we're cutting it against the grain, you can see we're getting all of this pinkness and this nice big smoke ring. So it's going to be absolutely beautiful. We're just going to put that with a little bit of the juices, kind of, get them all hot, and it's going to be just so good on like today when we're eating it, but then sandwiches and big baps and things for the next week. So that's the brisket that we made. But the thing that I'm most excited about is actually in this foil here. So here we go. So this is the Scottish beef ribs that we did. Can you see this?
Yeah.
So this was cooked the same amount of time, but it's taken it really, really nicely, all the way to the point that the ribs just come out straight. That's how soft it is now. So you just literally twist and the ribs come straight out. And then once you've done that, apart from that one there that's stuck, but once you've done that, then you can slice it, you see. So this is a sign that the barbecue was really, really slow, that it made it a really nice and moist piece of meat, okay? And then when we slice into this one, we should, let's have a look. Let's take that piece off. And then, oh, look at this. So can you see it's got a nice color here and a lovely, lovely smoke ring here. It's really, really, really beautiful. It's just tearing apart in my fingers. And, you know, you're just literally gonna like, you know, a bit like a pulled pork. And we're just gonna have that. Oh, it's gonna be a lovely, lovely, lovely thing in a bun. And yeah, this is exactly what I live for. These are the main reasons why we do it. So the way we made this is exactly the same way as we did the brisket. So we injected it with the same formula. So literally stock cubes, beef stock cubes, some water, a tablespoon of sugar, a tablespoon of salt, and a shot of whiskey. We injected it into the meat to give it all that flavor, and then we did exactly the same thing. So we cooked it on the barbecue for about 4.5 hours. Once it got to about 160 Fahrenheit, we used that to, we foiled it so that we get all that moisture to stay in. And then once we finished and cooked it at 190, 200 Fahrenheit, we just let it sit, and it just makes a really, really good barbecue. So if you want to do low and slow, all you need to remember is when you put it on the barbecue, it needs to be going on about 110 degrees Celsius. It's about 220 Fahrenheit. Once it's in there, try and keep barbecue at the same temperature and don't touch it. You know, the less you mess with the meat, the better smoke you're going to get, because every time you open up your barbecue, you're going to adjust the temperatures inside, and you're also going to end up with meat that's either going to get a little bit tough because it's overcooked. And the whole point is it's meant to take a long time. So, you know, that's the whole point. The only thing is that if you're cooking and you're having a barbecue in the afternoon, it does mean you have to get up at like 3, 4 a.m. in the morning to start it off. But it's well worth it in the long run.
That's
Well, we didn't have to today. We had it so late, so it was great. So I didn't have to do any of that. So yeah, I mean, and the longer you marinate it for, the better it's going to become. And just really try anything. Low and slow is the way to do it. If you've got a barbecue at home, the kettle barbecues are the ones you'll need to do the low and slow. It is possible to do it. Just buy yourself a fireproof thermometer, either that can be in there all the time, or I just use like a standard kitchen thermometer, like a heat probe. They cost about £7. But you will need a thermometer, for the meat probe. But you will need to get a barbecue thermometer if you want to do it this way. Otherwise, right, stick to your chicken wings, your steaks, all that kind of stuff. Your burgers, your sausages, they can all be done, fast and dirty, and they taste amazing anyway. But it's just an insight into, a slight bit of an investment. I mean, we're not talking a lot of money for you to get a little kettle smoker. And you can be making meat. And also, don't get scared about a big piece of meat, because, like I say, once whatever we don't eat is just going to get sliced up anyway. And then once that's sliced up, it'll go into the freezer, and we'll have it for sandwiches for the next kind of month or so. And that's what we generally do.
Amazing.
Well, yeah, that's it.
Chris, can I just clarify something with you?
Yeah.
Would you say that a barbecue, one of these gas things, is that a proper barbecue or not?
Where you see, it depends on your definition of a barbecue.
Right.
So, as a smokehouse in me, I say no, it's not. You have to have wood. It has to be, in charcoal. It's, it's all about the craft. But as a barbecue, I see a barbecue as getting together with friends. And if you're not going to do it, if you don't have a gas barbecue is the one you need to buy. If not having a gas barbecue is going to stop you going and cooking outside, you can still do loads of stuff with the gas barbecue. I mean, it's just going to be a little bit more like cooking inside, But most of the new ones, you could be putting in. There's no reason why you can't be buying little pellet smokers that you could put in with it and see if you can get some smoke in it that way. And don't get me wrong, I don't think you're ever going to get the same with a barbecue, without using coal. But there is a lot of commercial barbecue companies out there where you'll go to a restaurant and it'll all be done with a gas barbecue. And, so like I say, you can tell the difference, but I think it's down to convenience. If you've got the time to mess around with it and really, really learn the craft, then that, the charcoal barbecue is the way you go. If you want to enjoy your life with friends, have something that doesn't take much cleaning, and you can switch on in 30 seconds, then the gas one's for you. I mean, as far as we're concerned, I don't think there should be a stigma either way. And to be fair, it's one of the reasons why we do the product that we do. So all of our barbecue rubs have smoked salt in them, so it gives that smokiness there. Our salts are all smoked by burning whiskey barrels. So adding that on there is going to give a touch of that smoke into the flavour anyway. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're cooking outside, that's barbecue.
Brilliant. I'm just going to bring Nate back in for a final huzzah.
That's fine.
Hello.
Hello again. Right, Nate, I have actually gone ahead and made this the Elderflower Manhattan. Old Fashioned. So
Yeah.
using homemade elderflower cordial.
Brilliant.
I've used the orange bitters.
Ah, nice.
And then the lemon treated in the same way as the orange, removing the pith and it's very nice. It's quite different, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said that the hardest bit about doing the cocktails is pithing the oranges, but actually probably the hardest bit in my mind is coming up with a name for the cocktail. You've got a completely new cocktail there. You've got to give it a name.
Let me think.
No pressure.
Okay, I've got it. The Eld Fashioned.
The Eld Fashioned. There you go. I love it. Perfect.
Would anyone like an Eld Fashioned?
James, your turn.
James.
You're so on trend as well because foraging is like so in terms of bartending. So kind of the fact that you sourced your own elderflower cordial is amazing. We were talking about drinks before, and I think earlier on we just said about the Manhattan. Like if it is quite punchy for people, you can always just put a bit of ginger ale in there. So like a Manhattan and ginger works really, really well. Or if your partner is, if you say you have a gin collection as well, and you like something like a Negroni, you can just swap out the gin for a rye or a bourbon, and then you've got a Boulevardier.
Brilliant.
So I think that's a really good way for people to kind of like bridge that gap between gin and bourbon. That's a good way for them to step across. But that's a nice, easy way to make another American whiskey drink.
Very good. Well, I think we're about done here. I need to get something to eat. You probably need to get something to eat. Chris has made all of us hungry.
Oh God, that looks so good. I'm vegetarian and it looks good.
Okay. I'm going to bring Chris back in, and we'll just go. Hi, Chris. Oh, it looks lovely and green there.
I thought I'd come outside again.
Brilliant. Well, I was just wrapping things up, Chris. I just wanted to say thank you to Chris and to Nate for giving us your time and effort for coming on and chatting us through cocktails in the case of Nate and barbecue in the case of Chris. Go and look up Chris's website, Hawkhead. Do you want to give us the website address?
It's whiskysmoke.com. So whiskey without an E, .com.
Whiskysmoke.com.
.com, yeah.
Brilliant. And the Ragtime Rye is distributed by Nate's company Mangrove. So you can find Ragtime in all good whiskey shops.
Yeah.
And it's been fun, guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy enjoy your weekend, and say hi to anyone who knows me, or even if they don't. And look forward to seeing you in the very near future.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Slanger.